About 16 countries saw demonstrations against President Jair Bolsonaro, and movements in at least 251 cities in Brazil also rejected the far-right head of state policies. South Africa is introducing COVID-19 vaccine passports to support its easing of anti-epidemic restrictions on social distancing and business operations. And Qatar wrapped up its first legislative polls with no women elected. From the headquarters of Telesfera English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and now we begin with the news. Demonstrations against President Jair Bolsonaro has been confirmed in 16 countries and at least 251 cities in Brazil. On Saturday, the demonstrations called by the Front Without Fear and Brasil Popular denounced the government management of the pandemic, the environmental policies, and the economic measures that keep more than 19 million Brazilians in conditions of hunger. For this reason, they demanded an impeachment against President Bolsonaro. During the day, some 50,000 people marched in Fortaleza. There was also a massive rally in Rio de Janeiro, and during the rest of the day, the demonstration continued in Brasilia and Sao Paulo, with the participation of leaders of 21 parties of all political tendencies.
That's why I'm here in this fight against Bolsonaro, against the Bolsonarism, against this capitalist project that only seeks profit. We are fighting for a country where the production serves the interest of humanity, not the interest of the money.
This is a pandemic denialist government, spreading a policy of death, whose economic agenda drove people back to the starvation. We are in a desperate situation the president doesn't seem to care about.
Nearly 20,000 Haitians who are on their way to the United States are now holed up in Nicocli, Colombia, forming a human bottleneck even bigger than the one seen at the U.S.-Mexican border. Lacking visas, many people are taking an overland route to get to the U.S. Many moved to Colombia, Brazil, Chile, and other South American nations following Haiti's devastating 2010 earthquake. But now that countries in the region have eased pandemic travel restrictions and the Haitians are heading north, many believe they will have a better chance to get into the U.S. now that Donald Trump has been replaced in the White House by President Joe Biden. It's an exhausting trip that can take months as people board buses and taxis and hitchhike through 1,000 countries. Their progress came to a temporary halt in Nicocli, a town in northern Colombia that lies near the border with Panama. As many as 2,000 prisoners will be pardoned in Ecuador as the South American nation seeks to reduce overcrowding in its detention centers after a deadly riot this Wednesday. The measure was announced by Bolívar Garzón, the head of the country's prison authority. The director said that the government will prioritize elderly and female prisoners, as well as those with disabilities and terminal illnesses, for release. The move came after at least 118 inmates were killed and another 79 injured in the riots at the Penitenciaria del Litoral, in the southern city of Guayaquil, the deadliest instance of prison violence in Ecuador history. Officials stated that the gangs were battling with transnational criminal groups over drug trafficking routes. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta is to return to Barbados next week as part of efforts to strengthen South-South cooperation between the East African nation and the Caribbean. The president's second visit to the Caribbean island was announced by Kenya's High Ambassador to Barbados, Anthony Mushuri, at a press conference. The ambassador said during his stay, President Kenyatta will participate in high-level meetings aimed at forging stronger ties with CARICOM states. During the meetings, a memorandum of understanding between Africa and CARICOM will be signed, setting the foundation to establish the necessary key structures to give effect and renew hope in South-South cooperation. Talks will also involve the possibility of Kenya's biggest airline, Kenya Airways, starting commercial flights to the Caribbean. In Bolivia, the 9 civic committees met on Friday in the city of Potosí to announce activities against the constitutional government of President Ulises Arce. In a joint communiqué, they called for a meeting this October 4th in Santa Cruz to reject what they have described as a dictatorship of the Mass Party. They also announced a march and a national strike on October 10th and 11th, respectively, with the express purpose of paralyzing the country's markets and legal actions against the authors of the 2019 coup d'etat and the recent acts of racism and discrimination, such as the affront to the Huipala flag by the governor of Santa Cruz, Luis Fernando Camacho. On Friday, Camacho was summoned by the anti-corruption prosecutor for his direct and evident participation in the coup against Evo Morales and the violent actions that follow. Members of the Committee of 68 Pro-Democratic Freedoms and other activists held a protest in Mexico City commemorating the 53rd anniversary of the Tlatelolco student massacre. The Tlatelolco massacre, in which dozens of students were gunned down by government forces during a political demonstration in 1968, took place at Plaza de las Tres Culturas and remains a sensitive issue to many in the country, given the continued allegations of abuse against security forces, as well as the unsolved Ayotzinapa student abductions in 2014. Records show there were massive protests throughout the country that year, as well as a violent repression from the police and the military. After the 1968 rally, the federal police reported 26 people dead, 100 injured, and more than 1,000 arrested. However, according to reports that were declassified decades later, the number of dead got to 350. On Friday, the Commission for Truth and Access to Justice in the Ayotzinapa case revealed that the Mexican Army withheld information about the 43 students from Ayotzinapa who disappeared 7 years ago in Iguala, Guerrero State. The hidden information concerns communications between police and criminal groups that narrate the movements of the youths and demonstrate the agents' collusions in the kidnappings. The evidence points to Francisco Salgado Valladares, then commander of the Iguala police, and Gilberto N., alias El Gil, the leader of the criminal group between September 26 and October 4, 2014. The document will show that the international experts had already found out, after months of investigations, that the Army had information of the facts and that the students were divided into groups. On September 26, 2014, 43 students from the Pedagogic School of Ayotzinapa were kidnapped. The involvement of local authorities, police, and criminal groups remains unclear. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. South Africa is introducing COVID-19 vaccine passports to support its easing of anti-epidemic restrictions on social distancing and business operations. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said an immunized adult population is key to fully reopening the economy and avoiding a fourth wave of infections. In a televised national address, Ramaphosa also announced the country is further easing lockdown restrictions. Under the adjusted level of one lockdown level, the curfew in the country will move to between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m. More people are also allowed to attend indoor and outdoor gatherings. Despite the more positive outlook, health experts have warned that a fourth wave could be on the horizon, particularly with the coming elections of the country in November.
Health will soon be rolling out a vaccination certificate, which will provide a secure and a verifiable proof of vaccination. This certificate can be used to facilitate travel, to access establishments and gatherings and other forms of activity that require proof of vaccination status.
Moscow and Washington will discuss in Geneva an agreement for mutual recognition of their coronavirus vaccination certificates. The Russian Minister of Health, Mikhail Murashko, announced the beginning of debates with the U.S. delegation to agree on the mutual recognition of the documents, with the purpose of reviving the development of tourism between the two countries, as well as trade and other areas. The Russian vaccine, Sputnik V, developed by the Moscow Center of Epidemiology and Microbiology, was registered in Russia in August 2020 and is one of the few vaccines in the world with more than 90% efficacy against COVID-19. The two-dose schedule is approved in 70 countries with a total of 4 billion inhabitants, more than half of the world's population. And in Cuba, classrooms are ready to progressively reopen in the different provinces of the island as the process of immunization against COVID-19 advances. The Education Minister, Ana Elsa Velázquez Collella, informed that the senior years of technical and professional education, as well as pedagogical training in Pinar del Rio and the various sectors of Camagüey, remain pending to resume classes next Monday, October 4th. The head of the education portfolio explained that the measure is due to the epidemiological situation in those territories and detailed that in others they will begin from October 11th. This schedule has been organized taking into account the vaccination process with Cuban domestically produced shots, among the most successful in the world. It establishes that unvaccinated young people will be able to attend classes. Vaccination is not an exclusive warranty of safety in any way, so all biosecurity measures are rigorously maintained. And Health Regulatory Authority of Health Ministry of Nicaragua, MINSA, grants emergency use certification to the Cuban Soberana and Abdala vaccines. This authorization is made in accordance with the quality, safety, and efficiency requirements established by Nicaraguan technical standards. This certification, granted by the Nicaraguan Regulatory Authority, indicates that Soberana and Abdala vaccines are offered as a safe access therapeutic tool to reduce the transmissibility of COVID-19, produced by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. As a result of this approval, Dr. Eduardo Martínez Díaz, the president of Biocuba Pharma, expressed in his Twitter account, "The Cuban vaccines against COVID-19 have already been authorized for emergency use in Nicaragua. Soon, this brother nation will be able to be immunized with them." Now we address other topics. A cyclone approached the coast of Oman on Sunday, lashing the country with high winds and rain as a child was killed in floodwaters. India's meteorological department forecast that Cyclone Shaheen will make landfall in Oman from the Arabian Sea sometime Sunday night. It estimated the cyclone will have winds up to 110 kilometers per hour as it approached Muscat, the country's capital, which saw some people ordered to evacuate their homes. Flights had stopped across the country, which sits on the eastern edge of the Arabian Peninsula. And rescue operations are underway amid deadly flooding in eastern India. The weather agency has issued orange and yellow warnings from several districts of West Bengal and has warned of heavy rainfall until October 4th, 2021. Houses have been submerged and many people are staying on the rooftop of their houses. The relief center was reached its maximum capacity and local residents find makeshift homes while the army patrol on boats.
Approximately 80% of our field has been submerged. Houses have been submerged. Many people are staying on the rooftop of their houses. A few people have taken shelter inside schools. We have come here to see these places after visiting others.
At present, the situation concerning the floods is that the relief center has reached maximum capacity. A few are staying in primary schools and above the high schools, where the government has created relief centers. Accommodation and food has been arranged for them there.
Thousands have taken to the streets in Milan on Saturday to demand more action against climate change ahead of the COP26 climate summit next month. Activists voiced their frustration at politicians and big companies during the march, saying not enough action has been taken despite international meetings like the COP. The rally took place at northern Italy city on the final day of a preparatory meeting for delegates from around the world to identify where progress can be made before the UN Climate Change Conference starts in Glasgow on October 31st. The 12-day summit will aim to secure more ambitious commitments to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius aside to pre-industrial levels.
Not enough steps forward have been done to tackle climate change, despite the many demonstrations and the many international meetings like the pre-COP or the COP. There hasn't been any turn in the politics to tackle climate change. They still talk about reaching zero emission by 2050, while we say it must be done by 2030.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Qatar wrapped up its first legislative polls with no women elected to a representative council that is seen as unlikely to alter the distribution of power in the emirate. The vote was for 30 members of the 45-strong Shura Council, a body with limited powers that was previously appointed by the Emir as an advisory chamber. The Interior Ministry's election committee reported that male candidates were elected in all 30 of the seats up for election, despite 28 women initially being cleared to run in the polls. The results raised the prospect that the Emir will use his 15 direct appointments to the council to right the balance. The final voter turnout was 63.5%, according to officials, significantly higher than at 2019's municipal elections when fewer than 10% of voters cast ballots.
Feels like I get to be a part of history because this is a landmark voting. Like, we're voting for the first time here, and it's incredible that I get to be a part of it. And when I was putting my tick and folding and putting in the box, it just felt like I was a part of something bigger and a part of history. And it's incredible. It's awesome.
These elections are taking place for the first time in Qatar, and they will certainly benefit the people and the state in general. We are happy that this is something happening for the first time. There will be a change in many aspects, in more than one field. I wish success to all the candidates.
On Saturday, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte said he's retiring from politics and won't be seeking the vice presidency in 2022. The ruling PDP Laban party earlier nominated Duterte's former aide and now Senator Christopher Bong Go as its presidential candidate, while endorsing Duterte for vice president. Duterte made a similar announcement prior to the 2016 presidential elections, but ultimately ran for the post and won. On the other hand, Duterte's daughter, Sara, filed her certificate to run again as mayor of Davao, the city, and also leading the recent presidential surveys. Several experts point that Duterte might be taking a step back to favor his daughter in a possible race for the government.
The overwhelming, I said, sentiment of the Filipino is that I am not qualified, and it would be a violation of the Constitution to circumvent the law, the spirit of the Constitution.
Given that President Rodrigo Duterte decided to withdraw his acceptance of nomination, I am here to take on the challenge as the PDP's vice presidential candidate.
In Italy, at least 8 people died in a private plane crash. A plane carrying 6 passengers and a crew of 2 crashed on Sunday into a vacant 2-story office building in a Milan suburb. Italian news reports said all aboard perished. The crash occurred just outside the suburban metro station. People in the area heard a blast when the plane collided with the building, which was empty at the time as it was being renovated. A witness said flames and smoke shot in the air and several vehicles parked around the street caught fire, but no other casualties were reported. Thousands of women rallied in Washington, D.C. at the start of the day of nationwide protests aimed at countering a conservative drive to restrict access to abortions. According to the organizers, nearly 250,000 people are expected to turn out across the United States. Texas adopted a law on September 1st banning almost all abortions, unleashing a fierce counterattack in the courts and in Congress, but with few public demonstrations until now. The march will go to the Supreme Court, which nearly 50 years ago recognized the right of women to have an abortion in its landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. If the High Court were to overturn that ruling, every state will be free to ban or allow abortions. That will mean 36 million women will likely lose the legal right to an abortion, according to a Planned Parenthood report released on Friday. In Sudan, social movements are demanding the military board to implement a rotary transition period after it came to power following the coup d'etat against former President Omar al-Bashir. Political instability returns to Sudan following the launch of another alliance of civilians who have organized demonstrations in Khartoum to claim the rotating leadership of the Sovereign Transitional Council. Several uprisings and demonstrations have been generated as a consequence of the non-compliance with the agreement established after the seizure of power, according to which there will be a transition period of 3 years and 3 months, led by a military member of the first 21 months and a civilian member of the Sovereign Council for the following 18 months. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.